entire screen, and it's like share, and then I go to here. Still sharing, but you can still see this, yeah? Yeah, cool. All right. So we're let me just do a quick edit. Here we go. Made this great presentation, didn't change the week. All right, so I'm gonna present this. So week 2. So you've gone through 1 week already, guys. Now we're on to week 2. And I just want to like check in and remind you that failure is not final. So if you're feeling like even just trying to get through the first week was a little bit overwhelming, now's not the time to stop. So often the first week is where you're really finding your feet, figuring out how much time you actually need to allocate, where you could be better with scheduling. And I apologize that even though that's a really important topic, I'm not covering it this week, but I'm going to make a note to cover it next week because there's a few of you who are highlighting time management and scheduling and being organized as really important things that may be a little bit difficult at the moment. So hopefully I can help you out with that. I love talking about failure. I've finally realized that failure is actually a good thing because it means that you actually like did something. But just keep failing. You can do it over and over again. Learn from it. Just don't stop, because when you stop, that's when you do not get the results that you're looking for. So we're going to go back to your intake stock take, which I covered last week. Hopefully you did it. If you didn't, that's okay, because you may have a bit of an awareness of kind of your eating habits as they are. And I'm going to present 7 different kind of scenarios and behaviors which you may resonate with, and we're going to use those to take through this week. So if you did do the intake stock take activity, we talked about when did you eat, how did you feel before, roughly what you ate, and how you felt after. It shouldn't have taken you too long, but it should be a good insight. And this is also a tool in itself to create more mindfulness in regards to eating. So it's something that you can keep doing if you found like you resonated with it and it's something that didn't take up too much of your time. So what we want to know from that is maybe if there's any patterns that are arising, so things that just keep happening over and over and over again. Maybe there's some common triggers, whether that's an environment, whether that, like a certain place, whether you're at home or whether you're at work. Whether it's with a certain person, whether it's a certain time of day, whether it's a mental state, like after work, that sort of thing. I've written here IFTTT. That stands for if this, then that. So we start looking at your hypothesizing. If I come home from work late, I tend to make worse decisions for my dinner. But if I come home from work within good time, 4 or 5 o'clock, I've got more time to be able to make a better decision for dinner. So now we've got a pattern that we can make decisions about. So what could you do differently based on your intake stock take? And why are you doing it? Which is always needs to be answered, because if we don't know the why, any initiatives that we do to create a change are only going to last so long if that why isn't there, because maybe we have decided on a wrong why, so why that's aimed in the wrong direction, or that we just lose a meaning as to why we're trying to change what we're trying to change. So it could be a habit, could be poor organization. You could have too easy access to food that's not supportive, previously known as bad food, but we don't really talk about bad food and good food. Or it could be an emotional response. Now, emotional responses I do want to cover, but that is a very long presentation in itself. So I'm only going to talk more about like the habit and the kind of situations, not so much the emotions today. And let me just hide that. All right. So there's 7 things that I'm going to go through today, and you're probably going to just nod your head at one or a couple of those. And I want you to pay particular attention to those ones that maybe are more applicable to you. Can include unhelpful habits. Maybe you're lacking in something. Snacking and grazing in between meals, not having energy even though you're eating food, going overboard on weekends compared to, being quite in control during the weekday, bloating, and eating out slash picnicking slash weddings, because it's like picnic season and it's wedding season now. So anytime where you're not eating at home. All right. So let me go through a couple of things here. Unhelpful habits, previously known as bad habits or habits that don't support your goals. So for one person, it's not an issue, but for you, it may be. So when we're looking at a habit that's not beneficial to your goals, we want to make that thing less attractive, less accessible, and smaller. So when I say making it less accessible, is it just something that you don't bring into the home? So because it's not around, because you can't access it, suddenly it's not an issue. I mean, that seems like a pretty simple solution. And that could be all you need to do. So compared to trying to fight with something that's like your Achilles heel, or trying to balance that out with having to do more exercise or more of something else, why don't you just make it less accessible and call it a day? If that's not going to work for you, can you make it less obvious? So for me, if it's out of sight, it is out of mind most of the time. And my example there is, and obviously there's the picture of chocolate there. If I can't see the chocolate, I'll forget that it's there. So if, let's say, partner Carlos, if he puts it above eye level, so like that top shelf in the fridge, where you put the cheese and the butter and that sort of thing, especially if you put like the cheese and butter on top of it, I won't see it. I'll forget that it's there. And then so I won't start gorging on it. Can I make it less attractive? So that's like, if you still like chocolate, you still want to have a little bit of it, you don't want to get rid of it in your life. Maybe you could opt for like a darker chocolate, which is quite rich. It is a little bit more bitter. It's not as nice to eat more of it, so you tend to eat less. So maybe there's a type of chocolate that you still enjoy, but you're not as likely to overdo it. And the last one there, can I make it smaller? That's just looking at your portion sizes and the trigger there. So if it's, if you open up a block of chocolate and that you're going to finish that block of chocolate, because once you get halfway, you might as well have the whole thing, right? So then it's gone and it's done. Or can you get maybe like the individually wrapped ones? Will that stop you from eating more than one because you see that single packet as a single packet? Other things that may be fueling an unhelpful habit are other needs. So what do I really need in this situation? Am I actually looking for, this goes into like your emotional behavior and that sort of thing. Like, am I trying to manage stress right now? And in doing so, I'm eating chocolate to calm me down. Am I actually really hungry, but there's no food, so I'm just going to eat what's there? Am I upset? That sort of thing, which I'll cover in the next week. And there's mindfulness in bold and in italics, and it's got an asterisk. I'm going to cover that at the end. So it may just be being more mindful may help you manage a habit. Now I've got the cigarette packet there because that is a very classic example of how the Australian government has done all those steps to reduce the incidence of smoking in Australia. So they've made it less accessible. You can't buy it everywhere. Only in, supermarkets and tobacco stores. Tell me where else, maybe a pub. They've made it less obvious. So it's now in plain packaging and they don't actually advertise it. They put it behind their shelf. So you don't actually know what's there. You have to ask for what's there. There may be a list printed off and you'll just pick from the list. So you don't have those visions there of all these different colored cigarette packets. They've made it less attractive because they've put those really disgusting pictures on the cigarette packets of people with like, I don't even like the foot, like that black foot. If that doesn't do it for you, I don't know what does. Can I make it smaller? I don't know if they've got a limit. Well, yes, I know they've got a limit on how big you can make a cigarette packet. I know that they've also got a limit on how many you can bring into the country. Not that we're traveling overseas at the moment, but they have done a lot to make smoking less available, accessible, less attractive. And as far as I'm concerned, I know that it works. All right, so that's all I want to. That was a lot, but that's probably the everyone's biggest thing: unhelpful habits, previously known as bad habits, habits that aren't conducive to your goals, basically. So next up is the opposite. So I'm not having enough, I don't have enough of, or I need more of this. So if you did your intake stock take and you're like, well, I didn't really eat a lot of vegetables, and you have that awareness, this is what you need to do. So think of things like, how can I make it easier to eat more vegetables? Do I need to like have them more present in the fridge? When you have like that veggie bin, you can just forget, like throw them in the veggie drawer and just forget that they're there because they're so low or you can't see them. Maybe you need to bring them like to front and center on the shelf so that you actually can access them. Maybe you need to do some vegetable preparation. So you chop up a whole bunch of vegetables so that they're ready to be cooked. Like, you've taken away the most annoying step. Like, chopping vegetables takes so long. But if you already do that step on, say, like a Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all you got to do is grab them and then throw them into the steamer, throw them into the oven to roast, throw them into your whatever meal you're cooking, and it's done. Can I make it more attractive? If you don't really like most vegetables, can you prepare them in a way that makes them a little bit more attractive, a little bit more palatable? So it's things like using sauces or cooking in certain ways that will make them a little bit nicer to eat for you. Can I make it more obvious? I think that's kind of a little bit like making it easier, just bringing your attention to them. So maybe you need to put more vegetables on the counter so you remember, oh, I do have vegetables to use, that sort of thing. Can I make it bigger? That's just going from like a small serving to a bigger serving. Things like making a big ass soup or salad. So you've got a big volume of it so that it kind of forces you to, oh, I need to eat more because I've got so much of it. And can I be more organized? That goes back to just preparing the food a little bit more in advance. All right, let's move on. We've got number 3 is snacking and grazing between meals. So if you find that you think that your snacking or your grazing is a little bit out of hand, as in not conducive to your goals, think about maybe if your meals are big enough. So maybe you didn't eat enough for breakfast, and that on that day that causes you to snack between breakfast and lunch, whereas on other days when you have a big enough breakfast, has enough protein, you find that you're fine to make it through to lunch. So maybe look at the consistency and the size of your meals. Again, if they're timed appropriately, I know for me, I like to eat breakfast mid-morning, about 10 a.m. If I push it too late, say like 11, that turns into a bit of a grazing breakfast. I could tell you why, but it's a long story. But that's the difference for me, is maybe an hour. So if I leave it too late, the behavior is going to change. So now I know that I should really be trying to be consistently eating breakfast closer to 10 instead of that window. Do my main meals contain enough variety, so enough micronutrients, enough macronutrients, a little bit of everything, so that you're not just eating a very carb dense meal, or that you're not just eating like just protein. So making sure you've got variety and you've got some whole foods in there too. Am I bored? Am I anxious? Am I worried? Am I stressed? All those things that do lead to snacking and grazing. And is there a trigger like TV? So for example, when I sit down on the couch and watch a movie, a bag of popcorn lands in my lap, and within 30 minutes, I've made it disappear. Is there a trigger there? And how can I reroute that trigger so that that doesn't happen? Again, a lot of those things which are related to emotions, like the bored, anxious, worried, stressed, I'm going to cover those later, but let's just say that that's not your issue. Maybe it's one of those other things about timing. Are they big enough? And again, I've got mindful practice written down there. We'll cover that in a second. Number 4 is you're eating food, but it's not giving you any energy, or it's not lasting very long. That's where we look at maybe switching out some high GI foods for low GI. That's talking mostly about the type of carbohydrate that you're selecting, not the fact that you need to remove the carbohydrate, but you need to look for something that's a little bit more either unprocessed, whole food, and in the big brackets, something that's low GI. I can talk about it more, but you should know that there's carbohydrates that are higher in sugars that are going to make you spike energy, but it's not going to be sustained. Whereas there's other carbohydrates that kind of are more of a slow release. Things like your sweet potatoes, things like your more fancier grains, things like quinoa, couscous, buckwheat, that sort of thing, compared to like your white bread sort of things. Okay. Making sure you're choosing more energy dense food so you hit all your micronutrients. Eating slower so that you're actually digesting all of the food. And we'll talk about that that's a mindfulness practice, but I just wanted to include it there because it's one of the big things. And hydration. So a lot of the time we can be mildly hydrated and not really notice, but a big sign of mildly dehydrated. A big sign of mild dehydration is feeling a little bit fatigued. So if you just focused on your hydration, you may find that you do actually have more energy, especially in towards the afternoon. So always check the hydration because that fixes a lot of things. Almost there. 3 more. So maybe you are really good Monday to Friday, or very organized Monday to Friday, should I say. And then on weekends, like it's just a free for all. And that's where you really feel let down by yourself, is because, if you treated your weekends like your Monday to Friday, you'd probably be in a better position come Sunday night. So if that's you, if, the weekends are something that you want to fix, well, on the weekends, there's less chance that you have a schedule or a routine. So why don't you make one? So however you control your weekdays, do the same thing on the weekend, whether you need to have a bit of a calendar, so using your phone calendar or however you use a calendar or a diary, make sure you schedule in, well, I'm going to wake up around this time, I'm going to have lunch around this time, what will I do this morning? Kind of plan it out a little bit. I know it's the weekend, but do have a bit of a schedule, and that will help you plan out your meals a little bit better so you don't end up kind of leaving it too late, eating too many of the wrong things, that sort of thing. Plan your meals ahead of time to have an idea of what you're going to eat on the weekend. So again, it's not just a free for all or just kind of freestyling at the time. And eat similar foods on the weekdays. Eat the same or similar foods on the weekends. So just because it's a Saturday or Sunday, it doesn't stop you from having the similar sort of food. And again, the hydration, I've put that in there because, again, if you're a really routine-based individual like me, Monday to Friday, I have no issues with drinking water because I have such a set schedule. But on the weekends, because I don't have a set schedule, I forget to drink water. And then a lot of my food habits may be affected by the fact that I'm just a little bit mildly dehydrated and not making as good of decisions. Bloating affects a lot of people. And a lot of it is to do with mindful eating, which I'll cover. The 2 biggest thing is preparing the body for digestion. So making sure that you don't just rush in and start scooping food in, but you're actually taking your time to breathe before you start eating, breathe in between mouthfuls, and generally just eating slower so you actually have time to take that food in. So bloating can occur just from eating too fast and rushing the digestion process. Your body doesn't know what's hit it, and then suddenly 10 minutes later, it's expanded because now it's having to deal with a really fast influx of food. You can do an activity which works on being more aware of how the food feels, and also just going through one of those like expression of the senses. So you're actually spending more time with your food. You can see it, so you're looking at your food, you're looking at the colors, you're looking at the textures. You put it in your mouth, you can smell it, you can taste it, and you actually take a little bit more time just enjoying the food instead of just inhaling it. The last one here is maybe your gut flora is out of whack, potentially. Say if you've been on antibiotics in the last couple of months, or if you have been eating maybe like no low nutrient dense foods, not a lot of whole foods recently, your gut flora could be a little bit out of whack. And a simple either probiotic supplement or probiotic foods may help that along. The last thing that I didn't write in there that may be a reason for bloating is like a food intolerance. And again, how food fuels activity can help you identify what's actually potentially causing you bloat. And if you're one of those lactose intolerant people that refuses to not eat cheese, well, that's just on you. And I can't help you with that. All right, last one is just covering the eating out, the picnic season, the weddings, which I've experienced recently, and it didn't end well. I'm not telling you what to eat and what not to eat when you eat out. You should enjoy food. And if you start eating anything like me, like that, nothing is off the cards for me. I eat what I want to eat. I just do it in a certain way. That means that it doesn't affect my goals. So being able to celebrate and enjoy should not be a question. You should always enjoy the food and you shouldn't feel restricted in what you choose. But there's a few simple things you can do to still have it conducive with your goals. So you do not have to finish everything on your plate. So if you've gone to a wedding, obviously the food comes out and you don't really have much control over it, but you can choose how much you want to eat. Have smaller other meals on that day to compensate. So if you know you're going out for dinner or you know you're going to a wedding, that sort of thing, make sure like consciously have a smaller breakfast or consciously have, a very small lunch if you know that the next meal is going to be big and that it's going to fill you up. So that's a strategy just to potentially lower your overall calories, not into like a deficit, but so they don't explode into like thousands and thousands of calories if you had, 2 normal meals for the day and then it moved into like a giant meal, that sort of thing. So just have an awareness of what's coming up and plan your day accordingly. When you're eating out, if you do want to have a bit of a stable response to food, so if you don't want to like have a massive sugar crash, if you don't want to feel fatigued, if you don't feel bloated, you can choose whatever you want, but just make sure it does include protein, make sure it does include vegetables. So you can get some really delicious food and you do have a lot of variety, you do have a lot of choice, but like just find something with protein in it, make sure it includes that. Find something with vegetables in it and choose that. It's not hard just to order, like when I get some meals and I know that they're low in vegetables, I really want the meal, but I really want vegetables. So sometimes I'll just order like the vegetables on the side and it's like not a big deal. It's fine. 2 of my rules for eating, especially when we're getting into like, I don't know what sort of work parties are going to happen this year, but somebody's going to have a party. Eat the expensive food first. So this is like my buffet rule. When you go to a buffet and the first thing on the line is like bread and you see all these like food, like chips. Like this is food that you can make at home and this is food that is not very expensive. Why would you waste your time on that food when you know the prawns are just down the road? So if you're in a situation where there is a lot of food to choose from and you're worried that you are going to go overboard, if you go for the rule of the expensive food first, the most expensive food is usually high in protein. It's usually a little bit healthier, but it's still delicious and it's still like a delicacy. Like it's still the nice food to eat. Don't waste your time on the chips when there's prawns down there, okay? And the Rita method, Rita is a long-term client of mine. Pretty much everyone knows who Rita is. And she is in a position in her job where she gets wined and dined a lot. Obviously not at the moment because of COVID, but she trained a lot. If she could, she'd train 7 days a week. But because she trained so much and it's such an ungodly hour for a lot of our time, like 5:30 in the morning, she had to be on top of her game. So if she was eating dinner the night before, she'd know that there were some things that she just had to make a decision on. And one of them was dessert. Now, if she ate every single dessert at every single meal that she got taken out to, that's a lot of dessert. But her rule, and I don't like rules, but this is actually a really good one, was that it had to be pretty damn special. So if you're just going out to the pub, you know that the pub may have some like very average desserts, you know, like an apple pie, a chocolate sundae, a brownie, that sort of thing. Like if it is not, if people haven't been talking about it, if people haven't been raving about it, if there's no like blogs or reviews on this like dessert that you must have, why waste your time? So the method there is just making sure that if you are going to potentially like go over in your calories, like make it worth it. Make it something really special. Don't waste your time on like the chocolate pudding that you could have made at home. Okay. And again, hydrate in event seasons, especially outdoor events. Make sure you are hydrated because you will make better choices, especially when there's alcohol involved. And I can like say this from firsthand experience recently. Just make sure you hydrate. You're going to love yourself for it tomorrow. And again, let's look at some mindful eating practices. It's time because I've talked about this a lot and they do apply in a lot of places. Mindful nutrition. These are some mindful eating practices. So they have nothing to do with changing what you eat. It's literally just being a little bit more aware of eating, which I could be better at too. Number 2 is my issue. First one, eat to 80% full, and then wait about 5-10 minutes, then figure out if you're still hungry. There's like a 99.9% chance that you will not be hungry. And that leads into number 2, which is eat slowly. So you know if you eat too fast, you don't, because your digestion takes a while to catch up, maybe it's got like a 5-minute delay. So you're probably eating 5 minutes longer than what you should, if that makes sense. So you'll eat, you'll be full, and then your digestion catches up, and then you're over full. And then you've regretted it, but it's too late. You should have stopped 5 minutes ago. So just those top 2 again, eat to 80% full. You've got to figure out, and you've got to be mindful, and you've got to be aware about what 80% full feels like. So you feel satisfied, but you don't feel stretched yet. And eating slowly from the get-go, or whenever you can remember, just making sure that you do take a little bit more time. You're not inhaling your food. So making sure that you do put the utensils down between mouthfuls, and that you are breathing. You come up for air, you talk to people if there's people around. One thing I didn't mention here is making sure that the devices are away. So eating away from the TV, putting your phone away, putting your book away, just be there with your food and be okay with that. Just, have a date with your food. Using a smaller bowl or plate. So if your issue is portion sizes and you want the easiest way of learning to live with a little bit less, if you continue to eat to overfull, just use a smaller bowl or a smaller plate to still give yourself the same food. See what happens. Going back to the breathing and the slow eating thing, belly breath, so breathing that goes all the way into your belly. Doing that for about 60 seconds before you eat prepares you for digestion. It stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the nerve between the gut and the brain. So it primes you to being a little bit more sensitive to when you are filling up or when you're full. So again, just belly breaths. And it's a good thing to do before you eat. It's a good thing to do in between mouthfuls as well. And this is the one that I really need to get better at. I've come from eating at or living in a residential college where if you didn't eat fast enough, you didn't get seconds. So I just learned to eat really fast. And it's kind of like a habit now. People who are really stressed often eat fast. People who work a lot and just want to get back to work eat really fast. But again, that doesn't do very good things for your digestion, especially. So it's a good thing to be working on if, like me, you identify as a fast eater. We could go back to kind of things that we did in the intake stock take, like assessing your feelings before, during, and after food, and using more of your senses while you eat. That's like actually looking at the food, noticing the colors, noticing the textures, smelling your food, getting your like taste buds ready to eat, then eating the food. Feel how it is in your mouth. Chew the food. Feel how it is in the side of your mouth, the front of your palate, the back of the palate, all of the palate. And then swallow the food and actually just enjoy what you're eating. So that could be a good strategy. Say, for example, we go back to the chocolate. If you don't want to change anything about the chocolate, you still want it in the house, you still want it by the block, da 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 da, maybe just spend a little bit more time with that chocolate and you may be more satisfied with each mouthful that you don't eat as much. And that's might be as much as what you need to do. So there's plenty of strategies. I do want to like emphasize, go back and look at the ones that really resonated with you. Like, I have a problem with this, number 5. Go back and look at those strategies. This will make more sense in a bit. In your unlocked drive, number 4, additional resources. I've put some mindful eating resources in there. They're like different forms that you can fill out depending on what resonates with you. It doesn't cover all of them, but it covers some. So whether it's eating more consistently, if bloating is in there, so how food feels in your belly, eating slowly, eating to 80% full, or just being aware of hunger cues and more sensitive to hunger. They're all in there at the moment, and they may help you with this week's task. So just to remind you, there's no good food, there's no bad food, there's just food. I don't think I really demonize any food. And look, I had Hungry Jacks for lunch, but I did it in a way that's still conducive for my goals. I only had half a burger because I shared the other half with my mum because she eats like a sparrow. So there you go. Food is just food. It's more to whether or not it supports your goals or whether it goes against your goals. I'm never going to tell you, I'm never going to tell you what to eat, I don't think. But never say never, but I don't think I will. I don't give out meal plans. I don't push diets. I don't talk about good food and bad food. I don't really give out rules, like do this, not that. And I don't really push like supplements. And I'm talking about like harder supplements. Have in the past, don't anymore. I can guide you on how to eat. And how to eat is always going to be more beneficial in the long term as compared to what to eat. Because if I just tell you what to eat, the behavior could still be disordered or a little bit weird. So you could be eating a lot of the right foods, but if you're eating a lot of them and you can't stop eating and you eat really fast, you could still have some really, not very conducive underlying issues. So we figure out the how to eat first. And I had a client, Sarah, love her. Her goal when I was training with her from the get-go, it was fat loss, weight loss, and she needed it for health reasons. And when she lost a whole bunch of weight, you know what people asked her? They didn't care how she did it. Their only question to her was, "Oh, what did you eat to lose weight?" No. I mean, and it wasn't anything special. She didn't eat anything differently. She just changed how she ate and her behaviors. But the behaviors aren't sexy. It's all like, what do I need to eat to get this? All right. So if you're looking to make a change, here's the 3 things you need to do. Get your priorities right. Making sure that we tackle how you eat before it's what you eat. If you can tick off all those 7 things and you're like, yep, I've got the grasp of how to eat, and you're still looking for more results, then we go into, the eat this, not that sort of thing. Find the smallest step. Make sure you drill it down to what's the first thing I need to do. And so you don't jump in too fast. The example there is, my issue is I'm lacking in something. I need to eat more protein. I've decided that's what it is. All right, so what are you going to do? I'm going to eat more protein this week. All right, go ahead, go eat more protein. And they come back the week later. How'd you go? Didn't do it. Why? Well, I realized that I didn't have any protein at home. So I couldn't eat more protein because there was no protein. So eating more protein wasn't the first step. Actually, having that protein available was probably going to be the first step. So I was going to the supermarket, getting some protein, coming back, making sure it's available. So making sure you're aware that it's there, putting it on the counter. So if you're getting, cans of tuna to eat more protein, stack them up on the counter so that you remember, I need to eat protein. It's those small steps. Figure out for you what the smallest step and what the first step is, and do that. And if it doesn't work for you within a week, it's because you haven't found the smallest step, or there's like a bigger issue that has nothing to do with food kind of looming in the background, and we'll deal with that another week. And the last thing I want to remind you is that you are a science experiment. I can tell you habits and strategies that'll work for most people, but because nobody has had your unique life experience and chain of events up until this point, there's always going to be some variation. So I can pull out the weeds and give you the most likely scenarios that are going to work for you, but you're not going to know until you try. So that gives you the option for trying something that you feel confident with doing, being okay that it may not work straight away. You may fail. You may need to try a different way, but you're not going to know until you try. Okay, so your week 2 task, we're here. It took a while, but we're here. Is to identify a nutritional behavior that you'd like to improve. Now, I gave you 7 behaviors or scenarios. Just pick one that you were nodding your head with and you were like, yep, that's me, that's me, that's me. Pick one, just one. Figure out what the first step is for you and take only one action. We always get a little bit enthusiastic and we want to do, a couple of different behaviors and take a few actions. Just start with one. And you'll thank me for it because you get really good at the one thing, and then you either take the next step up in how to do it more often, or sideways of what's the next step, what's the next thing. So this is your week 2 task. Just the fine print down the bottom. This will resolve most habit-based concerns. Your deeper emotion-based concerns will be addressed later. So these will work most of the time if you just need to be a bit more mindful about food. Sometimes there's a deeper, sinister thing at play that, even with the best intentions, those strategies will not work on until we kind of dig out a lot of the weeds, which we'll do another time. So see how it goes for you. You'll soon find out whether or not these are strategies, and I'm going back to these strategies. Within the week, you should know whether it's working for you or whether it's something more. So figure out which one of these unhelpful habits, lacking in something, snacking or grazing, no energy even though you're eating, going absolutely nuts on the weekend, chronic bloating or eating out, and then look into the strategies that I have presented and see if you can just pick one. Say, for example, I go overboard on weekends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the calendar app that I use Monday to Friday. I'm actually going to kind of plan my week so that I've got a little bit of a routine. And just do that. That's all you need to do. Just do that and see how it goes for this coming weekend. That sort of thing. Try it. If it works, amazing. Keep doing it. If it still didn't work, all right, go back to the drawing board. What else could you do? All right, so I'm just going forward. Hope you're enjoying this so far. Not much to go at all. Here's my little tiddly bit. You can't run away from a subpar nutrition. So if you think, and I literally got an email from a client about, an old client about this today. Bless her. I'm going to deal with her later. It's so much easier just to fix a little bit about your nutrition than it is to try and exercise more. We know you're busy. We know you don't really have that much time for exercise. We have this thing called a job. And so exercise is usually short and sweet or few and far between. That's why the workouts that I'm giving you are maybe about 15 to 20 minutes. 1, because that's all you need. And 2, because running for an hour, doesn't actually burn that many calories in comparison. So I've just Googled this. Is it approximate? And obviously it's, dependent on your weight, and it's dependent on your fitness, and it's dependent on all these things. But for the average woman, running for an hour will give you 700 calories. So in the negative, it'll burn 700 calories. Or if you wanted to find those calories from somewhere else in the negative, if you were eating more mindfully and you were doing those practices, so you were more aware of your meal timing and you're more aware of eating, decent sized meals that stopped you from snacking, and if you did a few swaps and if you assessed how the food felt and all those sort of things, you could also find those 700 calories, but it's going to not actually take any more time. So that could be eating 2 biggies instead of 5, plus drinking soda water instead of Coke, plus making your lunch at home instead of buying like Uber Eats. Do those 3 things, that could be about 700 calories just there. It's actually quite simple, but often people are looking for exercise to be the answer for weight loss, where really just fix your food and you're good. You don't actually have to train that much. I like exercise, don't get me wrong. It's really great for fitness. It's really great for the mind. Not actually the best solution for weight loss, if you're wondering. All right, I'm going to touch on this, but we're going to come back to it another week because it relates to like the emotional stuff. But you may have noticed in the check-in, I ask about things such as how's your sleep? Do you feel supported by the people around you? Do you feel supported by your environment? That sort of thing. Do you know why I ask that? It's because that actually has an influence on how your week's going to go. There's other things I've listed, spirituality. If you are a spiritual person, do you feel like you are operating spiritually, or is there a conflict? Success, do you feel successful in your job? Do you feel like you're just kicking boxes around? Do you have time to rest and relax? Do you feel mindful and present? Do you feel in the moment, not in the past and not in the future, but in the moment? Do you have a sense of purpose? And are you sick, or are you not sick? Are you in pain or not in pain? It's things like this that you'd be surprised have an influence. They have a flow and effect. So this is why I'm asking them in the check-ins, and I just want to show you how that would actually look and how I can actually read into that. So say, for example, if you have a crap sleep, so you're fatigued, maybe you've got young kids and they don't afford you much sleep at all. Well, if you're fatigued and you're trying to operate during the daytime, maybe you're going for more sugary and more caffeinated foods and drinks to stay awake. Are they conducive of your goals? Yes or no? Maybe you've got an injury, you're in pain, and this happened to me with my foot. You feel sorry for yourself. You're worried about that pain or that injury. How long is it going to last? You move less because you're not in a position to move, and you go for comfort food to make yourself feel better. You don't feel supported by your family or friends. The response to that is that it's hard to stick to the goals because they want you to go out and eat certain foods or do certain activities or certain practices that are taking you away from doing the workouts you want to do, from eating the foods you want to eat. Not feeling supported by your environment or a changing environment, good typo Elise, can change your routine. It's easy to slip into old ways. Funnily enough, like I've moved here, I'm in South Australia. I'm 50 meters from the beach, but it's actually harder for me to go for a swim here because I'm a pussy and it's cold and there's waves and I don't know what creatures are like lurking below. So I'm actually finding it harder to do my swims than what I did when I was in Sydney, where the water was warmer, it was calmer, and I did not see any creatures down below. So it's crazy. The change in environment has now changed my attitude towards some of my goals. Crazy. So just so you know, and I don't want you to change what you're doing, but if you report anything below a 8, so anything 7 or below regularly, so day in, day out, week in, week out, you're like, man, I'm a 6 at sleep again, I'd start looking into that deeper, and we will go through this a little bit deeper in a couple of weeks' time. But yeah, anything 8 and above, I'd say, yep, good job. Keep doing what you're doing. Anything 7 and below that keeps hitting a 7 and below. If you think about, you know, constantly having poor sleep, think about how that affects the rest of your world and the choices that you make. It's probably going to have an effect whether or not you either realize it or believe it. It does. So, like I said, if you aren't getting your primary foods, whereas these are your primary foods, they're not foods, but they're nutritious for you. It's just it's really hard to make everything else work. That's why being a mom is freaking hard. Not that I can tell by experience, but from what I've experienced from others, like tough job because those kids are like taking away your sleep, they're taking away your time. You don't have any self time, no rest and relaxation. How the hell can you take care of yourself if all that is taken away from you? Tell me how. All right. So week 2, you need a special challenge. This is a challenge that's kind of like a one and done, and then I won't challenge you for a couple of weeks. So as well as doing your week 2 task of taking one of those 1 to 7 behaviors or scenarios and finding the smallest step and taking one action, I also want you to do my Brussels sprout challenge, and it has nothing to do with Brussels sprouts, or it could have something to do with Brussels sprouts. Let me explain. So I want you to expand your whole food horizons. So whole foods are vegetables, fruits, or grains and seeds. I want to encourage creativity in the kitchen, get a little bit kinky. And I want you to rewrite some stories that you may have written and never gone back to. Like, I don't like Brussels sprouts. For me, I don't have great experiences with Brussels sprouts. I remember them tasting pretty disgusting. I can say the same thing about pawpaw. Like, hate pawpaw. And because it looks like rock melon, you go for it and then it's just like bites you every time. And you're like, that's disgusting. Put it back. So pick something. Maybe you want to go for a browse in the fruit and veg shop or the markets. Either find something that you have no idea what it is, or something that you know you've like been burned by before, and you're like, oh, I don't like that. I remember I don't like that. That's why I don't eat it. I want you to rewrite that story this week. For me, I have actually bought Brussels sprouts and I showed them to mom and dad, and they were like, Elise, what is that? Get it away. So even they don't eat Brussels sprouts. So no wonder I don't eat Brussels sprouts because they don't like it. But I know and I've heard that if you douse it in olive oil and you sprinkle it with garlic or salt or something like that, like completely destroy the full health benefits. Apparently, you can make it palatable and it may actually taste good. So my mission this week is to cook Brussels sprouts and actually make them taste good. And if it doesn't work, well then kind of like I've died trying. I tried it, it didn't work. I can put that to bed again for a while. So if anyone has any great Brussels sprout recipes where it makes it taste good, in my head, I think I just oil, salt, and then roast them. Like hook me up, show me what you got. But I want you to find your Brussels sprout equivalent, whatever that may be for you. So you got an extra little challenge there. So you got your mindful nutrition task, just one small step, try it. You got your Brussels challenge, go to the markets, find something that looks funky, see if you can cook it up, see what happens. Just hopefully not allergic to anything, because usually like my thing is, like, is it really going to kill you? Hopefully it doesn't kill you. You've got your big ass soup or salad. If you're super clever and you haven't organized yourself, you could literally do the Brussels and the Bass in one. So you could buy something that does turn into a soup or does turn into like a salad of some description. I'm going to do 2. That's just me. You've got your 3+1 program workout. So there's always 3 mandatory ones and 1 optional one. Tomorrow, I think I said I was going to do workout 1 and 4. So we're going to do a bit of conditioning. And Friday, I'm pretty sure we're doing workout 2 or 3. I think it's 3. Who knows? Anyways, it's in the WhatsApp. You've also got your own schedule. So if you'd not want to show up to the classes, you've got the recording, or you just read the program and you do it. And then just a reminder, check in on Friday. But I'll remind you on Friday to check in on Friday. And that's it. Yeah, that's it. All right. I'm coming back here. Whew, how'd I go? Stop presenting. Oh God, that was almost an hour. Whew.
Hey, it was great. Also, Brussels sprouts, just loads of olive oil, salt and pepper. Cut them in half because you can't eat them whole. That's horrible. And you want to get them like a little charred. You've got to have some crispiness to them, like you do broccoli in the oven the same way. You've got to have that slightly blackened bit. That's what makes it so good.
Okay, we heard it here first. I am so